Cubs named Justin Steele their opening day starter, but Jameson Taillon scratched from his start. Should we be concerned? The Cubs farm system ranked number 2, and the roster trimmed from 50 to 47 in spring training. Ian Happ taking some rips. We got video and more. Thanks for hanging out with us here on the Cubs Baseball channel. Let's get this show started. Make sure that you guys like and subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. Go Cubs. Say everybody, it's Mick Gillispie. Welcome to the Cubs Baseball channel. And as we talk to you from here in Mesa, Arizona, just not too far from the Cubs spring training complex, we got a lot to talk about and some exciting times for the Cubs. And let's start with the good news first. And it's no surprise, but manager Craig Counsell made it official, and that is Justin Steele will be the opening day starter. So the Cubs left-hander is going to start opening day. I don't know that any of us should be surprised at all. Of course, an all-star and was a candidate for the Cy Young Award last year. Really was fantastic. Has come out and looked very Justin Steele-esque so far this spring. So the George County native from Mississippi, same town as Claude Passeau, who was part of the 1945 Cubs World Series team. It's going to be the opening day starter, so it's really exciting for the Cubs. So that's the good news. The bad news is we were expecting Jameson Taillon to get the start yesterday in the spring training game, but he was scratched. So not sure exactly what's going on, other than this is a guy who I'm slotting into the 3 or 4 spot in the Cubs rotation, and someone that the Cubs are going to really need if they're going to contend for the division and the World Series. So with all of that said, is there anything to be worried about with Taillon? Those are questions that we're certainly going to have to ask. And does this put the Cubs in a spot where maybe they look more seriously towards another starting pitching option like Jordan Montgomery, who the Cubs have been tied to for a long time, and he's still an unsigned client of Scott Boras. Cubs already got one deal done with Boras. Maybe they could get another one done. We'll find out. But Taillon, who was supposed to pitch on Saturday, didn't make that start. And, you start to wonder exactly, what's going on. Now, another guy who right now is dealing with some injuries is Ian Happ. And the good news for Ian Happ is I'm guessing he's progressing really well. And the reason I say that is because yesterday I watched him take batting practice. Well, really, it's called a sim game, live BP, whatever you want to call it. But him and, 3 or 4 other guys are rotating and hitting, but they're not, some guys are running the bases, some aren't. He's got a left hamstring strain, and they're saying that he'll return late March. But let me show you the video. He looked really good, just going in there, taking rips. He was on the backfields at the Cubs complex. Here's a Gold Glove winner and someone that you would expect to be the switch hitter in the heart of the Cubs lineup. Now, when I was there, and I wasn't there the entire time, only saw him bat right-handed. And he is a switch hitter, but he took great hacks. Once you hit the ball, if you're him, you're not running. So we didn't see him run the bases, and I know that's part of a hamstring strain is running the bases, but it's good news for the Cubs just to see him getting in there, taking pitches, swinging away, doing the things that he's going to need to be working on to hopefully be ready by opening day. So, as the Cubs move forward, it kind of leads us to, roster battles that could potentially be taking place. And one of those that I felt like we needed to talk about was Alexander Canario. Is there a possibility that Canario could, be on the major league roster to start the season? And I think the answer is yes. I feel like with the issues that Hap's having, and then also the fact that the Cubs are very left-handed heavy right now, they're going to need more right-handed bats. We saw the roster cut with Pete Crow Armstrong and Owen Casey and some other guys that were sent back to the minor leagues a couple of days ago. They made another cut we're going to talk about here in a second. It was basically pitchers. But Alexander Canario, guy that got up to the big leagues last year. Remember, he had the 6 RBI game. First guy in the history of the Cubs to do that in his first start. And he's had a really good spring so far. He's hitting the ball. He's always dangerous at the plate. And from a lot of information that I'm getting, he's been very impressive so far. Plus, he can play left field. He can play center. He can play left. So as Hap kind of rehabs back, and then you look at, well, Mike Tauchman's going to be on the roster. Cody Bellinger going to be on the roster. Looked good in yesterday's game. And then obviously Seiya Suzuki, who's looked good as well. Could Alexander Canario be another guy that makes the team? And I think the answer is yes. I think he's really forcing this. And this is something that we were kind of hoping that maybe Pete Crow Armstrong was able to do. But obviously with the struggles that he had, was sent back to minor league camp, and it'll be most likely the regular season before we see him. Now, with all of that said, you talk about the Cubs minor league system, and more good news for the Chicago Cubs. And that's, they're getting a lot of recognition. Now, does having the number 2 farm system always relate to wins? Not necessarily, but Baltimore's won, and I think they're like way ahead of everybody, right? Yeah, I love that jacket. Now, the Cubs are number 2, and it's because of the depth that they have right now in the system. You're talking about from AAA all the way down to the lower levels of the minor leagues. But Owen Casey knocking on the door, Pete Crow Armstrong knocking on the door. Matt Shaw, who's probably going to start at AA, has a chance to maybe push his way through. Cade Horton, who we've talked about before, and just kind of being around the complex. I don't think I'm the only one that feels like he may be the best pitching prospect that the Cubs have had since Pryor and Wood. And I mean, I know those are very, very high standards, but I'm just saying as a prospect making his way through the system, you're talking about a guy who just has all of the tools and goes out there and gets the job done. So that's why, and you can go through that top 30 list, and there's another 10 or 11 guys that I feel like could possibly be top 30 prospects. Very good farm system, a lot of depth, and it's all about how those guys are going to translate from the minor leagues to the big leagues. Luis Vazquez, who's on the 40-man roster now, the shortstop, not going to make the team out of camp, but another really interesting prospect. So it's the Cubs followed by the Brewers, the Padres, the Tigers, Tampa Bay, the Rangers, the Dodgers, the Pirates, and the Reds. So, pretty impressive company there for the Chicago Cubs, obviously headlined by Pete Crow Armstrong, Owen Casey, and Cade Horton, but a lot of other really good players in there as well. And that was, just released. So I love to see that when you're talking about like top prospects and what they're able to do. Now the Cubs have trimmed the roster again, and it was basically just 3 pitchers. Sam McWilliams, who's a really interesting guy. You're talking about a right-hander who was with a bunch of organizations, left baseball, took some time off. The Cubs saw him playing independent ball, and now he's back. I saw him pitch a couple of days ago, looked really good. Chris Clark, who is one of those really solid starters who is eventually going to break through, and then Brad Wick, who saw him pitch too. He looks really good coming back from an injury. Those guys off the roster, now down to 47. You got to get it to 26 by opening day, and we're starting to see Craig Counsell and the Cubs make moves every day, which, by the way, I saw Craig Counsell before the game yesterday, and you can just tell he's really getting comfortable with this Cubs organization after being signed by the Brewers. So that's a look at everything going on right now in Mesa. We'll get back to you guys again tomorrow. I want to remind you to get in the comments section. Talk about the things that you think are important as we start to dwindle this roster down. What are you looking for? What are you concerned about? Is it a problem that Jameson Taillon missed his start? Should we be concerned? And then what's the backup plan if you don't have him? Is it Javier Assad sliding in? Is it Justin Smiley sliding in? I mean, you've got to figure out what you're going to do if you don't have him by opening day. Now, it is, March the 10th when you're watching this, or maybe after, but at the same time, you don't want to lose Taillon, who is one of the guys you're paying to be in that starting rotation. Thanks for one other thing I got to talk about before we get off here. And I'm going to show you guys that right there. That is the AA Smokies championship ring. We've talked about it. Had the opportunity to talk to those guys. That's my view yesterday from the Cubs complex of the entire team, a lot of the top prospects in there. We talked about the championship, Kevin Graber, their manager, Rick Strickland, Jamie Vermiglia, Jared Banner, who helped put it together. Jared Banner told the Smokies front office that they came up one game short. He said, we're not coming up one game short next year. Lived up to that. How many people do you ever see that? Hey, we're going to do this, and they get the job done. So congratulations. It's pretty cool right there, right? Yep. Anyway, guys, thanks for hanging out with us here on the Cubs Baseball Channel. And again, want to remind you that we'll be back on tomorrow. Make sure that you like and subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. Go Cubs.